Welcome back to the Daily Dope. Um, so anyway, we're over here talking about Jeff Sessions for the last year. It's getting kind of old and boring. There ain't really much left to this conversation. You don't really get out much to talk about this bullshit until he's, at some kind of a forum or place where there's a bunch of old people and a bunch of old prohibitionists and a bunch of super right wing conservative, super Christian, super Bible Belt buddies of his that are all from the 80s. I mean, this guy is, there's nothing more 1980s than Jeff Sessions. You can't even, you can't come. He's like the Keebler elf playing Pac-Man with Nancy Reagan. I mean, this guy is as 80s as it gets, man. So anyway, he's out here at the Heritage Foundation again. It's like the second time he's been there since he's been Attorney General, or maybe even third. So he goes there to do this speech at some kind of Reagan, Reagan's remembering party or some shit. Let's see, it's the Reagan Alumni Association. I mean, Reagan, for better or worse, this not my favorite president, but the guy would have been he probably would have been considered kind of on the left in today's political environment. But these guys still worship him like he's some kind of god. And especially for the drug war. That's what Sessions, he's just in love with that shit. So I got some video from this. We're going to go ahead and just watch some clips together here, and I might chime in once in a while. But yeah, let's see what this is all about.
My goal for 2018 is to see a further decline. We had a 7% decline last year in actual prescriptions of opioids. We think doctors are just prescribing too many.
All right away, man. I want to congratulate the further dissemination of safe access to medical marijuana, and the expansion of recreational marijuana, which in my opinion are the two driving forces behind that 7% decrease in overall prescriptions for opioids in the whole country. Now, you might argue that it's higher than that, that places that have those policies are doing better than 7%, and it's true. But there's still a lot of Alabamas out there. There's still a lot of places that don't have medical marijuana laws worth of shit, and there's still a lot of places that don't have recreational marijuana laws. Now, there's still a lot of people there that are trying to smoke marijuana and trying to obtain medical marijuana, and I appreciate that. And I used to be there when Michigan had laws against those things, and still does, recreational speaking. But I'm just saying, when you're in that situation, you can't rely on that to be your medicine. So obviously opioids become more of your medicine or whatever.
We're just describing too many. Sometimes you just need to take two Bufferin or something and go to.
Like I said, this guy's like the 80s glamorized. What in the fuck is a Bufferin? Now, for all of you people that don't actually know what a Bufferin is, and I don't even know if I remember this correctly because I don't think I ever really actually took a Bufferin, but I do remember the commercials when I was a kid. A Bufferin is like a Tylenol or some shit. And yeah, it's just I think it's even just aspirin, but it's like really, really lightweight for some reason. So I don't even know, like what the fuck that reference is about.
Go to bed, but not these pills become so addictive.
So he's trying to tell you right here that addicts just take some. People that have debilitating pain is what he's talking about. Hey, you should just take some aspirins and go to bed. We're talking about people that can't even fucking move on a day-to-day basis. But he's like, just take a couple of not even full-strength aspirins and go to bed. This guy has no idea what people are going through when it comes to pain. And we're going to get into his solution to the opioid crisis in some more videos. I believe this isn't even his main speech. This right here was like, if you see, he's kind of sitting in a chair. They had like a little Q&A session afterwards. I wasn't there, so I have no idea. That's just what I think. That's what I gather from all the shit I read about this.
And the DEA said that a huge percentage of the heroin addiction starts with prescriptions. That may be an exaggerated number. They had it as high as 80%. We think a lot of this is starting with marijuana and other drugs too.
All right, I'll give it to them that when they said 80%, they might have just been rounding it off, but that's pretty much where it is, man. But for you to jump to marijuana, as always, marijuana, it's marijuana, I tell you. Let's go back. We think a lot of this is starting with marijuana and other drugs too. What does that even mean? Well, I don't know. Other drugs, I guess he's saying that, the person that does meth, well, they're gonna do opioids and heroin too. This is this whole idea that's this Kevin Sabat fantasy world where marijuana creates addiction in a person. Like a person would not be addicted until they smoke some marijuana, then that turns them into a drug addict. And then they just start going down this spiral where they go to the next thing, and it always ends at heroin because they act like there's this like step-by-step process where you're like, okay, I did marijuana, now what's the next thing that's not super bad, but it's not, it's not like heroin, but it's not marijuana because I've already done that, so that's no good anymore. I don't, that's it's a weird logic. If you want to watch my other video about this, I made a whole video about just the gateway theory. And we're all sick of this gateway theory and any kind of hinting about it. So let's hear that one more time.
As 80%, we think a lot of this is starting with marijuana and other drugs too, but we'll see what the facts show. But we need to reduce.
We already know what the facts show. All right, the facts are the facts, and they're already there. You just said they were a lie or an exaggeration or whatever, but that's the facts. Maybe the other 20% have things going on like their heroin addiction started because they just went straight to heroin. That's possible.
The prescription abuse. But
when you're saying 80% of these people are raising their hands saying, man, I was prescribed opioids and that went to heroin. That's a pretty fucking, even if it was only 50%, now you have a gateway theory that you can work with. But you can't just throw weed out there like, oh, weed. I bet you if you ask them, they would have said they smoked weed before they ever did any prescription pills. Maybe, but that doesn't even fucking matter. You were talking about opioid addiction.
Hopefully reduce the addiction that's out there.
And like I said, he always thinks that if you overall reduce marijuana, then you're going to reduce the addiction that's out there. Because the addiction that's out there, that's the real problem. All right, this first one is where he basically this is his main speech, and I don't know how much of it I actually captured, or this would be live satellite news on YouTube. That's if you can see their logo floating around and shit. That's thank you Live Satellite News for capturing this live clip. I guess I can credit you for that in the credits down below. But anyway, so this one, I cut out all the bullshit before this. I just isolated a couple pieces of his speech so we could talk about those. Well, this one, before this, he just goes through this tirade of all these right-wing dream come true accomplishments, like getting rid of DACA and strengthening religious freedom and telling people they couldn't mandate that, they don't have to provide their employees with birth control anymore and all this rule of law shit. So he was, he's just sitting there bragging and gloating about that. And then he had to throw in this tough part about getting hard on, the street gangs. And this is a refrain that keeps coming up over and over again in the Trump administration. They keep talking about the street gang MS-13. As if MS-13 is some kind of foreign invasion that's taken over neighborhoods or whatever. Now, I would argue that what's going on is these neighborhoods are already decimated because the economy around these neighborhoods, be it some kind of an auto factory or whatever it may have been, that was pulled out, shipped overseas or wherever, and then the only economy left was selling drugs and whatever crime. So street gangs like MS-13 basically formulated through different connections because of the drug war, and that's what enabled them to become what they are today. Especially the actual drug war itself, which keeps the black market and that network that I just mentioned alive, as well as provides infrastructure funding, weapons. Once you're in the black market, you got your own network built up. You can pretty much get anything on it. You can distribute anything on it. So, I mean, I don't know what the fuck. The main way you stop all that is to get rid of the drug war. End the drug war. If they don't have that, then they got basically there goes most of their income. There goes most of their funding. But this guy is totally not down with that. But listen how tough he's going to be on MS-13.
We're hammering violent groups, especially the vicious MS-13. We are not going to pretend. We're not going to allow them to take over a single neighborhood, a single street corner. These gangs, these violent groups, really attempt to assert sovereignty, their sovereignty over portions of the United States of America, and
they're just taking over neighborhoods that you guys don't care about no more.
American is entitled to have its government protect them, enforce the American law, not the outlaws' law. So we're working at that.
I'm sure you are. All right. So after his little tirade about MS-13, he kind of uses that as a springboard to go into his little marijuana tirade. So let's see the first clip of that.
And we're not going to pretend that there's not law against marijuana. There is a federal law against marijuana. And we're not going to pretend marijuana is good for you either. I don't think it is.
So a couple of takeaways there. First of all, the crowd. Oh my God. Like I said, he goes to this Heritage Foundation and speaks a couple times, and I think that that's where his audience is. If you look at the people in the crowd, they're the Heritage Foundation, man. They're a bunch of old, highly conservative right wingers. I don't even want to know who's in that room, to be honest. All right, so notice how he changed his posture or whatever, is kind of when he started talking about weed. It was almost like he had this new scripted way that he carried himself or whatever. His demeanor kind of shifted. Now watch it, it'll happen again, but here he goes talking about this just say no thing. The press made a big deal out of this. Now this is at the Ronald Reagan alumni whatever meeting gathering. This is the kind of thing that these guys, any mention of Ronald Reagan or Nancy Reagan is just gets the crowd all warm and fuzzy. It's gross.
We don't think illegal drug use is recreation. Lax enforcement, permissive rhetoric, and the media have undermined the essential need to say no to drug use. Don't start. That's what President Trump said to us the other day in a meeting. Don't start. What did Nancy Reagan say? Just say no. Don't start this stuff.
So we're starting to get a picture of of the enforcement policies based on this 1980s just say no policy, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about addiction treatment versus enforcement of the rule of law. Let's see what that looks like.
To a member of the administration, I remember yesterday, he was telling me his son had a heroin problem. He's a white-collar businessman. Twice he's been in treatment. I read, if you saw Admiral Winterfield, I think he's vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Winterfield, poignant story about his son. Twice they put him in expensive, the best treatment, and took him off to college, and not long he was gone. Overdose death. 64,000 a year are dying of overdose. These addictions are so powerful. You don't just, well, we're going to walk over here and have treatment. Most of you probably have known people who tried it. It's just not that very effective.
So there you have it. He knew somebody that. It was weird because he was talking about the person in present tense as if he was still alive. Oh, he's been to rehab twice, and then he talks about him next in past tense. And now he's talking about they, like his parents, the person that he knows, the general or whatever, Wilkinson, whoever it was. My condolences to the general. Sorry about your son. The dispassionate way in which Sessions used that story as a way to demonize treatment was just totally disgusting and out of line. I'm sure, General, that you don't appreciate that kind of stuff. I hope you're, okay, because if somebody used a person that I know's death like that to try to sell this idea that rehab don't work, and maybe you feel like rehab don't work because it failed, and maybe a lot of people out there feel the same way. Now, there's a lot of science that would say that rehab can work. There's a lot of ways you can say, and you can prove that it does for a lot of people. But what it does come down to is we're looking at a situation where the amount of people that relapse after going to rehab is incredibly high. So it being sold as a success is misleading at best. And if you look into the numbers when they give you really good success rates, you see a lot of weird things in there adjusting those numbers, like the marijuana stuff. That if you look into that, they make people admit that they're addicted to marijuana, and it's pretty easy to get in and out of a rehab clinic if marijuana was all you were addicted to. So they got pretty good numbers there. But what it comes down to really is what works is when somebody's ready to get clean, they'll get clean. All right? And maybe no amount of rehab, or we can argue about that, whether it's helpful or works and all that shit. But meanwhile, he's not going to, it doesn't sound like he cares about it. It sounds like he's just throwing rehab under the bus. And now he's going to tell you that the approach that he likes is to arrest doctors.
Right, as a nation to take action against that kind of activity. And we're identifying a lot of pill mill doctors that are prescribing incredibly high numbers of pills that do lead to addiction and even later heroin addiction. We've taken many other steps to reduce the rule of law in the department. Right, as
well, I mean, he's not really saying exactly what he's going to do, but if you read between the lines, he's not a fan of marijuana. He don't think it's medicine. He don't think it's going to be useful in the opioid epidemic, and he thinks that the idea that you write a memo to protect, to tell the DOJ that they can't enforce marijuana laws, he's not a big fan of that, as we've seen. So you can kind of guess on where he wants to go with his marijuana policy. Excuse me. But you can definitely see where he wants to go with his opioid policy. He's completely ignoring all science, completely ignoring all reason, completely ignoring marijuana, completely ignoring everybody that has a brain on the subject, and all the, the track record of running what he's about to run, which is don't spend any money on treatment, which is what Republicans always do. They're like, we need a good marketing campaign for our just say no message. We have, and we need to spend a little bit of money on treatment, but a lot of money on enforcement. And the little bit of money they spend on treatment goes to shady ass outfits, like I said, where they make marijuana people go. Marijuana kids, I should say. And that's all I got on this. Hit the subscribe button if you aren't subscribed. And I'll see you next time.